So this review is for the Atomstack Maker AC1, but this was one of the products I was probably the least excited about trying out, just because I didn't really see, from the ad online, I didn't really see the usefulness of it, to be perfectly honest. But after having tested it, it's actually a pretty cool machine. I was pleasantly surprised, and there is one application that you will see in the video towards the end that I think is going to be a game changer in my shop. So this is something I would consider a gadget. You don't need it to run a laser, but if you have the disposable income to purchase something like this, it is nice to have. Like I said, I was pleasantly surprised by all the stuff it can do. I'm going to go through setting it up very briefly. I don't want this to be a setup video. I'm going to link another video of someone who did a very thorough review of this, setting it up and doing multiple tests in order to dial it in. I'll attach that to this video if you want to check that out. But this, I wanted to spend a lot of time showing some more practical purposes in the shop.
So like I said in the short intro, I'm not going to do a huge in-depth unboxing and installing, nor am I doing a huge in-depth how to get it working. But especially with how to get it working, it is a little in-depth. And I did want to kind of give people an overview of that process for anyone considering purchasing something like this, because it might not be something you're interested in. But it went together extremely easily, especially compared to putting together some of these lasers. It's basically just a couple parts. There's no wire management. This will connect to your computer with a USB. So I just put a couple pieces of tape up top there, and that worked fine. There's multiple adjustments because you have to get this set to the right height and angle in order to use it with your setup. Now, according to the manufacturer, this is compatible with various types of lasers. I'm using it with an Atomstack laser, but you have to have light burn to use this. So I do want to point that out. And according to the instructions, you have to have light burn. So basically what you have to do first, and I'm going to, like I said, go through this very quickly, you have to calibrate the lens and then align the whole camera. As soon as I saw the words calibrate, I hate that word. Whenever I encounter things that need to be calibrated, it usually, in my experience, equals a hassle. That's kind of annoying. That doesn't always work. So the first time around I did this, you basically just draw a square frame with an X, and then you go through and position the camera with this focusing pad in multiple positions in order to align the lens. But you can see once you plug this into your computer, there's a pop-up box and you can see the whole process. So this is the auto-focusing part. You have to move it around the bed in multiple positions in order to get it auto-focused. It will tell you if you have a good pattern or a bad pattern, and then you can move on. I believe there was 5 or 6 positions. You could see my hand there. I'm moving it, capturing the image, and then once it's good, you can move on to the next part. So this is pretty standard for calibrating stuff. Some of it didn't work. I had to play around with it a little bit. The pattern that they give you is glossy, so at one point when the sun was setting in my window, it was creating a shine on the pattern, and then I wasn't getting any positive results. So heads up to people, I turned off my overhead lights and then it worked fine. Then you have to go through and align the camera. So this process is after aligning the lens. They walk you through it, and like I said, the video I'm attaching, he walks you through this step by step if that's what you want. This looks like it took a very short amount of time. This took me a couple hours to do the first time. It was mildly frustrating. Full disclosure, did not enjoy it, but once I had it done, it was working really well. So you could see you basically have your bed there, and I was using the honeycomb bed for this because you had to attach these thin pieces of paper in order to do all this alignment, and that would have been a little bit of a hassle to do on the new bed I have with all of the spikes. And then I just wanted to play around with this. So I had this scrap piece of wood and I accidentally knocked it, which is why I couldn't finish that pattern. But you can see there's this update overlay button which will keep refreshing the camera, and you can see the shadow of what I was working on and then what I have in Lightburn. So this is pretty cool. You can see I obviously had it moved. I can adjust the piece of wood, update the overlay again, and it's just a really simple way to align the piece. This camera is supposed to be accurate within 1 millimeter. I fine-tuned mine enough to where that was accurate. I think I got it even a little more accurate than 1 millimeter. The problem with this was I had set this aside to work on stuff in the shop for 4 days, and when I came back, all of my alignments were gone. They were no longer in the computer. This seems to be a problem some people are having with cameras in general. If anyone knows how to troubleshoot this, that would be awesome, because I basically had to go through and do that entire calibration process again. One person said they were able to load an older version of when they were working on Lightburn and it popped back up. Mine did not. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So if anyone has some tips on that, that would be great. This is the second alignment. So this is the second part of it. You can see I'm showing what I'm doing. I didn't film that whole thing again, obviously. That is the one downside I found to this camera. I was using it just today, so once I come back to it, I can update this video as if my settings stayed there, or if someone knows what I'm doing wrong to make my settings disappear. But that isn't really a deal breaker for me, but that would be a pain if you have to keep calibrating this. So you can see I did a circle on top of a circle, and it was aligned extremely closely. So one of the tests in a video I saw was to do a fill circle on top of your circle and then update your overlay, and you could see how close your pattern is to what was already on the table. And mine was extremely close. It basically printed right on top of it. If it's not, you can see there are a couple things you can change in the panel they give you. You can shift your axes up and down if you want to really dial this in, but this was close enough for myself. It's within 1 millimeter, so you're never going to get it to duplicate perfectly, in my opinion, which is not anything I would want to do anyway. So as long as it was close enough, that was going to work for me, and that's what I got. You can see I made a couple circles, I moved them, and you can see that what I am putting on the computer versus what the laser is printing out is extremely accurate. It is off by maybe a hair. So that was nice. I will say my first calibration was not as close as my second calibration. So if you are having some issues with your patterns being extremely off, I would recommend recalibrating, as terrible as that sounds. But I had done it at this point like 4 or 5 times, because I told you the first time around it took a little bit of time, and this last time I did it, it took maybe 20 minutes. So it wasn't terrible. So then this laser I'm testing says it could cut cork. I haven't had any success with doing that yet, so I thought I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, with seeing if I could align my logo on a circular image on the bed and get it as close as possible. Now I know people make jigs and whatnot for people that make coasters a lot in order to get this all in place. For someone like myself who kind of does more one-off stuff, it's convenient in order to transfer all this stuff to a singular object on the table. Now I did test this cutting through the cork, and it got a little over halfway, which is more than I've gotten in any other laser, which was pretty nice, but I couldn't get it to go all the way around. You can see what is in Lightburn is mimicking pretty closely on the bed, give or take that 1 millimeter of error, and it's a very, very deep engraving. The speed at this was, I believe, 6,000. I think I could even go faster than that because it's quite deep. Then I wanted to see if I could get cut through this cork, so I messed with the settings a little bit, and I got almost all the way through. This is by far the best results I've got with cutting cork. I think if you wanted to play with these settings even more, you can get it to go through. I was kind of running out of time for this video, so I didn't mess around with it too much. Now this is what I was really interested in seeing work with this camera, and that is the ability to trace patterns. If you watch the channel, you know I've been interested in drawing and burning some of my own images, some of my own woodworking. That's really hard to do because I don't know how to draw vectors, and I honestly haven't had the time to teach myself. So this is actually something older I had in the shop that I've burnt on a computer, and it took a really long time, days, to get myself to be able to import this image the way I wanted it and have the laser read it and cut it. And that's because scanning was a pain in the butt, and you can't really use JPEGs for stuff like this. The edges come out messed up. But this camera has an option to trace the image, and that was what I just did. And it just the camera traced the image I had in front of the bed. So you can see it's picking up some shadows. I'll show you that a little bit later. But there's a trace image tab. I went through and played with the settings for a little bit. I don't need this for anything at the moment, so I wasn't going to fine tune it. But you can see it's lifted off the table a little bit, so the camera was picking up the shadows, giving me a little bit of room for error. If I wanted to do this again, I would probably use some spray adhesive to tack this down and get a really accurate image. But once I update the overlay, remove what was behind it and update the overlay, I'm left with this perfect tracing of this pattern I have. Now, you might only appreciate this if you had seen that video and saw what a hassle it was to originally get my laser to cut this out, and compared to how simple it is now. It's a very basic process, and it came out pretty perfectly. And this is really cheap plywood I have laying around the shop that I use for scrap work on these lasers because I don't want to use nicer stuff, and it went through it without a problem. And then I could lay the pattern on top of it, and you could see, except for that error that was the shadow, it's pretty much spot on. And this is the game changer for my shop, the ability to be able to draw something, because I don't want to sit in front of a computer all day and transfer that to Lightburn and have it cut out to this level of accuracy, is going to be a huge tool in the shop for stuff that I like to do. Just a gigantic game saver to the way I was trying to do it before. Obviously, if you already know how to draw vectors, this isn't going to be an issue for yourself, but I've taught myself computer programs before. It's time consuming. I just don't have a ton of time. So like I said, this processor is pretty cool. I had this seed catalog laying around. I wanted to see if I could get that to work as well. So you can see I'm just tracing the image. It's just a button in the camera file. You can go through and fine tune these settings, remove the background, and then it copies perfectly what is underneath that camera. Now this image looks a little busy, but that's because the catalog that this is on was busy. So you can go through and ungroup this image and selectively delete stuff as well. So you can go through and change these images and delete stuff. Which was really nice. And then I was engraving this as well, so this was also a fairly large engraving that this did pretty quickly. So the ability to take something laying around the shop, copy it that quickly, and have this machine cut it out is I just thought this was really cool. You can see how close it is to the final product. The camera's not showing it very well, but the detail in here is actually pretty nice. And like I said, this is not great plywood. If I had done this on something like red oak, I think it would have looked even nicer. So like I said, this is kind of a gadget. It's a cool, I'm happy I have it. It's definitely more useful than I thought it would be. I didn't know you could trace images and stuff like this from the link that the company had sent me. But this is really cool. And there's also, you can film while you're using it as well. But honestly, the angle I have at my iPad's probably a little more convenient for YouTube than this overhead angle, but that is also convenient for people that want to film time lapses. And this machine also leaves a really nice engraving.